Welcome to the Wavemakers Podcast by the Ocean Opportunity Lab. I am Sol Medina Calvoy. In each episode, we dive in with fantastic female founders from around the globe, movers, shakers, and entrepreneurs who are changing the game in ocean and new energies. On this episode, we dive into the powerful journey of Laura Canevari, climate adaptation specialist turned climate entrepreneur, whose 15-year path bridges science, finance, education, and frontline community action. From scholar to practitioner to founder, Laura has dedicated her career to accelerating climate resilience in vulnerable coastal communities. Her work spans adaptive livelihoods, value chains, capacity building, and interdisciplinary systems thinking, always rooted in inclusion, dignity, and long-term transformation. When Hurricane Iota destroyed her home on Old Providence Island in 2020, Laura experienced firsthand the gap between reconstruction and real resilience. What followed was not only recovery, but reckoning. As top-down rebuilding efforts sidelined local voices, she helped facilitate a community-led adaptation process funded by UNESCO and Open Society Foundations, turning planning into reclamation and resilience into sovereignty. Laura challenges the dominant logic of climate finance, calling for funding models that are relational, long-term, and community-defined. She speaks candidly about burnout, emotional labor, political erasure, and what it truly costs to stay awake inside broken systems. Her message to funders is clear. If you hold the purse strings, hold the weight too. Named one of Colombia's 40 under 40 in 2024, Laura represents a new generation of climate leadership, courageous, systems aware, and unapologetically human. This conversation is not just about adaptation, it's about sovereignty, it's about justice, it's about redesigning the future from the inside out.
In studio today is Laura Canevari. She is joining me from Latin America. She is in a place called Providence in Colombia. Hello, Laura. How are you?
Hi, how are you doing, Sol? Lovely to see you again.
Lovely to see you too. We could have done this in Spanish, but we're going to go on English, even though we are both Latin Americans. So happy to have you. I would love to hear a little bit more about what do you do at ITACA, your company?
Of course. So ITACA is actually an acronym. It stands for Innovation, Training, and Adaptation in Coastal Areas. And that's basically what we do. We're helping coastal communities build resilience to climate change by introducing capacity building programs, by introducing science, by introducing mechanisms to access finance to help local champions and local communities be able to plan and implement solutions to our climate challenges in the region. And ITACA has made a strong commitment to the Caribbean region. That is all of the islands of the Caribbean, Central America, and Colombia. That's the area where we are trying to have most of our impact.
Yeah. So you're traveling around different areas in Latin America, but you're based in one place, or you always are moving around?
Yeah, no. I'm based in Panama, where the company is registered, but my work does take me a lot across different corners of the Caribbean. Right now, I'm in Providence Island, where we have done projects in the aftermath of a hurricane, and I've come in part to work remotely from here, but also to see how those communities are doing. But say next month, I'll be in Belize. In May, I'll be in Dominican Republic. It's one of the fun parts of my work, really, is that I get to visit many locations and get to see them through the lens of a resilience project.
Amazing. And work with the communities, right? Because that's, you kind of engage.
That's really central to what we do. Part of our ethos is we need to shift the current, we need to shift how people perceive coastal communities from looking at them as vulnerable communities that are subject of studies and analysis and so forth, to thinking of them as actors and agents of change. If we don't empower our communities, there's no chance that we're going to have sustainable resilience models in the long term, because you need the agency, you need the local actors. So a lot of our work starts bottom up. It starts understanding what are local communities' perspectives on climate change, what are their challenges, and building with them the knowledge base to sustain planning frameworks that can be kind of like designed at their scale for their needs. Most times you will see that in the last 30 years of development, there's been an attempt to import development models or to bring solutions from the outside. And most times those kind of approaches fail. They fail because they haven't centered the solution around the local people. So that to us is very central to all that we do.
Fantastic. And acknowledging also their wisdom, right? Because you have to learn, there must be amazing things you learn from them, right?
That's right. In fact, my master's, which was at Oxford, it was a master's in science, but my thesis was focused on knowledge co-production and how do we build participatory approaches that really elicit and legitimize local forms of knowledge and understanding. So a lot of my work, for example, involves participatory mapping, which is a tool that we use to solicit spatial knowledge that communities may have. They know where the threats are. They know where the resources are. So part of our work with participatory mapping is put on digital what the community knows in a way that we can legitimize that kind of knowledge and that we can combine it with different layers of scientific understandings of a problem. So if you're in a coastal community like I am right now, you would have all of your science, about the location. You'll have the maps that tell you about the biodiversity, the soil, etc. That comes from remote sensing from satellites. But then you would have people's stories about the place also incorporated in the map. So for me, that's one of the things that I enjoy doing the most, participatory workshops.
Oh my God. What an amazing job. Super interesting. Yay. Okay. Let's go to the second question. That is basically about your legacy. So if we are looking ahead, when you think a few years in the future, like what kind of legacy do you want to leave?
I think that our biggest asset right now is a network of experts that we have kind of like curated and one by one selecting them and bringing them into the ITACA network. This group currently has about 230 associates who are people who live in the Caribbean or work in the Caribbean with a strong interest in making the region more climate resilient. So we have actually made an important turn internally this year. We've decided that we're going to put a lot of our focus on empowering that network. So we're actually going to shift from having a roster of consultants, as what other companies would have, to actually injecting energy, systems, and opportunities to the collective, which is what we're calling now this network. It's the ITACA Collective, so that the collective becomes a place where we can incubate ideas, where we can set up teams, and where we can implement projects across the region. So my vision is that in 5 years, this collective will be the go-to ecosystem to find professionals that can help, achieve resilience and adaptation across the region. It's a big turn for us, because it's basically taking something that was an internal resource for winning work, you could say, to putting it out in the world and decentralizing it and turning it into its own ecosystem. So it's very exciting. We're currently doing what I call a sprint. This sprint started in December, chose 11 experts from the network, and they're helping on the sprint from December to March to build the charter so that we can pilot a governance system for this collective. So what this means in practice is these experts are helping to define what are our governance ethics, our governance structure as a collective, no longer just as ITACA the company, but as all of us equally placed in the table. And mid-March, we will have this charter and we will start onboarding other experts interested in this kind of approach. And we will, for a period of 12 months, pilot this governance structure because it's very difficult. You will see that it's very difficult to build a collective, to build a decentralized governance and deliberation structure that allows people in Jamaica to propose a project, everyone in the collective to decide if it's the right project or not. So we're kind of right now in that process. And I think if later in life, if ITACA Solutions as an entity transforms or is no longer there, the ITACA Collective will be there. And it will be a go-to ecosystem for clients, donors, development banks to find the right professionals to work in the region. That's what we're building right now.
Fantastic. Super interesting.
Yes. It's now all about really building the strong foundations for that legacy.
Yeah, great. I love it. And if we rewind a little bit on what sparked you as a founder or your journey at the first place, can you kind of point the moment or the situation or, what
Yeah.
was it that make you
Yeah.
kind of
Well, I'd
like
say that there were two moments. One
Mm,
was the reckoning, and the other one was the opportunity that came from, that reckoning. So the reckoning occurred in Australia. I grew up in Colombia, and then
Mhm.
I moved to Australia to do an undergrad in marine science. I specialized in coastal management. So
Yeah.
when I was there, I thought I was going to do a career on, I don't know, ecotourism or coastal development. But when I arrived to Australia, I was faced with the testimonials and meeting people from the Pacific Atoll Islands, Kiribati, Tuvalu. These are islands that we're talking back in 2006 and 7, right? This is a long time ago. So back then, these islands were already negotiating with Australia and New Zealand the whole resettlement of their entire villages. So entire communities were being resettled under very unfair negotiation conditions, because of sea level rise, because of water intrusion that was reducing their ability to live in their homeland. And this really struck me. It was something that was happening in the now. It wasn't some graph projecting future displacement. I was meeting the people who were restlessly trying to figure out a solution on how not to lose their identity when they're losing their land. And it
Yeah.
was then that I decided that I would focus my marine science and coastal management career towards climate adaptation in coastal areas. And you know what? Because what happens also is that even if you were to stop all greenhouse gas emissions in the world right now, you would still get sea level rise. We are committed to it. Yeah. Perhaps the rate of sea level rise would be less, but we are
Mm.
committed to it. So coastal communities across the world are facing these challenges now. They've been facing it for decades now. So I decided to dedicate my career to climate adaptation in coastal areas because of that.
Mm.
Then what happened was that I said, okay, well, how do I start getting to know more about this? So, you're still an undergraduate student. So I started getting some internships, and I ended up working with an organization called the National Climate Change Adaptation Research Facility, NCARF. And Jim Palutikov, who was a distinguished author of the IPCC, which is a distinguished group of scientists in climate change, she
Yeah.
was the director of this center. And I had an internship with her, which was absolutely, revealing. She just gave me so many foundations to how to work in climate adaptation. And they organized the first climate adaptation conference in the world. This was called Climate Adaptation Futures in Australia in 2010. So, quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
Why was that so critical for me? I think that conference was just a game changer. I had asked Jean if I could come and volunteer because I had no money to pay for the conference, right? So when I said volunteer, I thought, well, maybe I can move a mic or two. I can go here or there, I can help moving the seats. They said, no, we can sponsor you to the conference only if you speak at the open plenary. And
What?
I'm 23. It's an open plenary of 1,000 people, all of whom are very distinguished scientists, I'm like, what can I possibly say to them that they don't know already, I'm like, I took the critique, the debating approach. And I basically said to them that they're doing it all wrong, that they are all inside their ivory hours producing science that is not applicable to the real problem. And well, it seems that my speech, which was passionate and full of controversy, was liked a lot by the audience. And right after the speech, we had tea break, and a few professors from very distinguished universities approached me. I got approached by MIT, Stanford, and Oxford. And the lady who came from Oxford, the professor Diana Lieberman, she just came and she said, look, everything you've said, it resonates perfectly with this master's program at Oxford. If you apply to this master's program, I'll support your application. And I was like, Oxford, UK, the other side of the world.
Yeah, of course.
Well, why not? It didn't apply to any other masters. I was like, well, let's give this a try. And I got accepted. So that was definitely a significant, upgrade, or time shift for me, because I suddenly, without even thinking about it, I had ended up in one of the best universities in the world to study this. So, and Diana Lieberman, she was my supervisor during my master's at Oxford. And ever since, she has been a mentor to me, whenever I'm having like a crisis around my academic identity, which I try to retain, academic authority in this space. Whenever I'm not sure how to navigate, academia and how to show myself as a practitioner and academic, I go to her and we still have some wonderful conversation. So I'd say, the reckoning and the opportunity started in Australia, where my career started as well.
And the timing on your side, like obviously, and the connection to your purpose and passion. I think when you're aligned, there's no doubt, and therefore, super attractive to enroll others. So
and let me add something to that, because what you're talking about, the timing, the right person being in the room at the right time. So 2 years after the conference that led me to meet Diana, they organized the next one, the second Adaptation Futures Conference, organized by Diana at the University of Arizona in Australia. So she said, can you please come to Arizona and do that thing you did there and just be very controversial and tell everyone off? And I'm like, yes, I'll do that. And I went to Arizona, I gave the plenary speech, and who was there in the crowd? John Firth. John Firth was the CEO of Acclimatize, which is an adaptation consultancy firm in the UK. So he approached me after my speech and he said, Laura, what are you doing after your master's? I said, I don't know. He's like, no, you're coming to work with us. Did you have a place with us? So John has also been an incredible figure for me, because he kind of like just completely trusts me and believes blindly in everything that ITACA does. When I was in Acclimatize, I was with them in his company for 8 years. When I resigned, and I said, I'm resigning because I'm moving to Panama and I'm going to start my own thing, it was such a shock for them. But John was like, whatever you need, I'll be there. And so he became first a mentor to ITACA, then a strategic advisor, and most recently an investor. So that was a person that, time and place, we were just in the same conference in Arizona, and forward, from 2011 to 2026, is still like one of the best supports that I've had, in the journey.
Thank you for sharing that. And from this kind of start point, and even though you were kind of supported and mentored by amazing people and backing you up, was there any challenge or surprises, or even maybe good surprises that shaped you to struck out when you moved to Panama?
Being an entrepreneur, it can be a solitary journey. I did start with a co-founder, but she also had other things in her plate. She was mainly backing me up and supporting me. So a lot of it was like, how am I going to do this? Nobody tells you, when you're an entrepreneur, that you're going to go from having one paid job, well paid, in a comfortable office, to 13 paid jobs without, certainty of how you're going to get them all done or with the right skill set, right? So the whole game is, you have all of this. I look at it as a mental wall with all of these post-its, right? With all of the things that need to get done for the company to prosper. And the game is always, how can I take some of these post-its and give them to somebody else? How can I start building the team to help me where I'm not the best, or to help me to advance in our areas, right? So I think that luckily for me, I've had these mentors, and I've had like community of practice and people around that I can talk to and that I have been able to go to, in those solitary moments of the entrepreneurship journey. And I would say that it's critical, to have people who support you, both professionally and outside of your profession, who understand that you are committed to this cause, that you're building it brick by brick, that will give you the support that requires. So I've been extremely supported by family, by friends, mentors, and the academic community that I still hold good connections with. But I think that it's every time I am faced with like one of these moments of, this is so much, like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing these moments always led me to be reminded that the kind of skills and experience I am getting as a CEO, it's hard to get it anywhere else. Yeah. So there are things about my leadership skills, my strategic, like thinking skills, that would not have evolved the way they have in the last 6 years, had it not been for those moments of anxiety of, where am I going? Or had it not been for those tough conversations with clients and with subcontractors and negotiations and things that emerge that you can't go to anyone else. You have to solve them. And I wouldn't change it for anything else. It's a tough journey. I think that everyone who's an entrepreneur has some extreme level of positivity, hyperactivity on them, we're just completely powered by our vision that we just push through. But it is an effort. So I've always tried to also retain some time to like rest, absorb, recover, from all of these moments of, here's a challenge. How are you going to manage it? And I'll tell you something. I'll tell you one thing before I started ITACA, it was right when I was accepted to Oxford for my master's. That same week I got accepted to Oxford. My mother was diagnosed with cancer. And I was like, well, maybe I should just put Oxford aside and go and stay with my family. But the support of my family was like, no. You're going to go and do this. You're going to do this. And that's going to be the pride of the family. And I kind of had this message just arrived, which I keep telling people whenever you're overwhelmed, just think that the challenges are tailored to your size. It's like when you go to the tailor, and like, it kind of like goes, so you got accepted to Oxford and your mother is ill. Challenge accepted. Somehow this is an evolutionary upgrade. Yeah. The world is telling me I'm ready for bigger shoes. And so it was very challenging, going through that period. And it doesn't get better because I graduated from Oxford, but then when I got accepted my scholarship for my PhD, 3 days after I got accepted my scholarship, my mother passed away. So now this PhD has had to have more meaning, It has to have more meaning because I spent so much time outside of home, building this career. It better be for something.
Yeah.
It better be for something. So whenever I have times that I'm like, oh, it's really hard, just keep pushing. I think about those moments. I think about the choices that I made for my career and for this broader vision, and it sustains me. I'm reminded, okay, no, you gotta keep doing this,
Yeah. So your mother in soul kind of became the patron of Ithaca in a way. She's the light.
I'm going to tell you something. You know how you mentioned at the beginning, I'm in Providencia right now.
Yes.
So right now I'm actually in a house that my mother built when I was little on this island, which is really what led me to have a career in marine science, because this, here I learned about ecosystems health. I learned about fisheries, and this house name is Ithaca. So when I decided I'm going to open a company, what am I going to call it? I chose Ithaca because for me it was I just wanted to give that, homage to my mother, and the fact that having had the opportunity to be raised here, part of my childhood, led me to a career in coastal management. So I'm currently in what you could call the Ithaca headquarters.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I'm in Ithaca headquarters. What the acronym stands for, it came later, right? I, is it information? Is it innovation? T, is it training? Is it technology? Yeah. We came down to information, training, and adaptation in coastal areas. But the heartbeat of that operation is here. It's here from a personal root and from belonging to a community, that it is faced with the climate challenges on a daily basis. I'll tell you more. I'm currently sitting in the house of my mother, but this house was rebuilt in 2022 after Hurricane Iota destroyed it in 2020. Yeah. Okay. Hurricane Iota destroyed 98% of this island. So when I first came, there was nothing. So I've had the opportunity to experience firsthand as an individual and as part of a community what it means to build climate resilience. And it's also thanks to this Ithaca, to the headquarters, because when the house got destroyed, I'm like, no, we need to get it back up. Yeah. So it's a very personal, journey where the personal and the career have kind of intertwined a little bit. You can imagine, like when I came to Providencia after the hurricane in 2020, I had all these ideas from my master's and my PhD and from Ithaca, the company, about how to build resilience. And suddenly you're faced with the reality of people, and it's like completely different from what you read on the books, right? So I've fine-tuned my perspective, my practice, thanks to my personal circumstances and events. They have kind of fed new material into how we do work in a way.
Yeah. What a beautiful story. It's like everything is connected, you know? Like the legacy, the purpose, like even your supporters, like it's just, you're blessed.
Thank you,
Like
Sol.
this is amazing. I think you're blessed and you've been supported by amazing people. But is there anyone specifically that you want to highlight, like partners or customers or mentors that
Look,
really
well,
opened the door?
yeah, I mean, I definitely in my progression on a climate career, I've mentioned Diana Lieberman was very important for my academic career, and John Firth for providing me with the opportunity to get into climate consulting. But I cannot forget at all the importance of the co-founder of ITACA, Anaite Mills. So when I met her, she was working at the Inter-American Development Bank in Jamaica. And I was basically going for coffees with her because I wanted to just kind of like get some intel on what the IDB was doing and see if there were going to be some future works. But then we started talking and I started sharing with her my critiques of the sector of consulting. I started sharing with her my vision of how it could be done differently. In particular, I felt very strongly that the region had good professionals that should be doing the work. Why are we always bringing people from Europe or US to carry all of this technical assistance? We have people in the region. So I kept going to her. And she's like, Laura, you're starting to sound like a broken record. Do something. Yeah. And so I had already started to feel unsettled in the consulting world that I was in and wanting to create another version of it. And then also Brexit was about to happen. And I was like, do I want to stay in the UK or not? Oh gosh. And so Anaite said, look, she had already been co-founder and supporter of another group of women who had started a company on EdTech in Jamaica. So she said, look, I've got a little bit of experience helping build like something. I'll support you on it. And if I hadn't had her support, her validation, her advice throughout that period, I don't know if I would have had the guts, to like just go and do it. And throughout the years, she's been like an incredible ally because I'm a dreamer. I'm the one who like shuts out like, crazy ideas and let's see what happens. She kind of brings me back to earth. Every time we have a strategic meeting, she's like, Laura, come back down here where we need you. So I could not have done it at all without her. And of course, I also think that there is an acknowledgement to be made to, the people that I collaborate with. I've been very lucky to collaborate with people that are very open in that they share what they know, they share their resources. It's really confusing to me how within a sector like climate adaptation and disaster risk, how there can be so many institutions and personalities that are so closed, when we need massive and radical collaboration to get things done. So I've just been very lucky to find people that have just said, hey, I believe in your light. Let's make it shine more.
Yeah.
It's very humbling. It's also whenever I have like a moment of like, oh, I don't know if I can do it today. I'm like, yes, you can. Because you owe it also to the people who have been there for you. Yeah.
You can't put in a box light, right? You need to share it.
Yeah,
it will be selfish of you or not spreading the light. So yeah.
But yeah, I've given many talks to like young career professionals or people who are studying, and whenever they ask, what's one advice you'd give them, get good mentors. Just don't be afraid to talk to people and say, hey, would you mentor me? So it's kind of like, it's an awkward at the beginning, you're kind of going and pitching someone to be your mentor, but and I'm actually right now looking for new ones because as you move on in your career, new things emerge that you need to tackle, and your existing mentors can help you in some fronts. But if you're opening new ground, then you need other mentors. So I'm actually call out for any mentors who want to work with me.
Mentor. We will call for mentors.
Yeah.
And if we talk about momentum, if everything will be aligned and, things will be kind of in the ideal scenario, who are those partners, those customers, those investors, those mentors that you want on board for your next move? Can you share with us?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of critical features or attributes that I look in those partners. The first thing is, how could you say this? Like to have an honest commitment to continuity and to process with the communities that they embark initiatives on. Way too often under a situation where, a study, a plan, whatever it is, a product is designed for a particular community. And then once you hand in the product, off we go, It's been demonstrated that in adaptation finance, not even 10% of the adaptation finance reaches the local community. This was an IISD report in 2017, I think. What that means is that most of the finance is going into feasibility reports, preparing plans, X, Y, and Z. And I've already been in a situation a number of times where I've engaged a community for 8 or 9 months. And then I hand in the deliverables. They say that the deliverable is a plan, but then the funder or the government don't have the money to implement the plan. So what are we talking about? I need partners that are really committed to building the capacity locally and that are willing to invest in the processes that build trust, that strengthen communities, that ensure that they are at the center of the conversation and not just validating what other people do. I'm still in the look for those kind of actors, I've had really extremely good experiences working with the international cooperating bodies, development banks, and so forth, but it's always project by project. And it doesn't have this continuity. Adaptation is a process. It's not about having written the plan. In fact, doing the plan is just an excuse to get the actors talking and getting to think together collaborate on the thing. The plan is just a document, but really it's the process that matters the most. And I still don't find that many founders who are looking at it, maybe in the private sector. If I were an NGO or a civil society organization, perhaps it would be different. But we started ITACA in the business of consulting. And I've got to the point to say that I'm a bad consultant, because I hand you over the report, but 2 years after, I still have a WhatsApp group with the community from that report. And we're still trying to figure out ways to get them funding, I've even gone and visited project sites a year after the project has ended on my own means to know what has happened. And most times, nothing has happened, So committed organizations who believe in the importance of building local agency and designing processes that allow for the flexibility, for the deliberation, the participation. It's not just a tick box exercise. No. Have you spoken to the community? And there's still a lot in this sector that needs to be shifted to new forms of doing it. And for people like me trying to do it differently, we just need to get very creative. We just need to win the work. Many times I just win the work and then start adding the things that I think the work needs to make it really community-based or locally led.
Yeah, I don't know why it sparked, now that you're speaking, that this sense of continuity, I just couldn't help to think about the collective that you're talking about. Like integrating into the structure of your collective that has kind of that sense of responsibility and ownership and reciprocity. I'm just talking, but it makes sense to kind of bring that together. And as a Mexican, I'll tell you that also this issue of continuity is something that I know what it is. I have lived it in my culture, and it's very frustrating. But I also understand from what you're saying that it's a global thing with climate situation. So it's maybe integrating things, is bringing to the table, is making the table bigger.
And because part of the reason to establish the collective is in response to this fragmented landscape. A fragmented landscape that makes the use of very, very scarce resources very inefficient as well. And it's individuals who can give the continuity, to things. So that's why we are putting all of our bets in strengthening this collective.
I'm totally in love with the project that you're doing, and especially gaining my heart because of the region that you're operating and that you're also Colombian, and, and the energy that you have and the light that you share is kind of like, I want more. I want to learn more. And I guess spreading the word and also kind of figuring out, discussing things putting things like, I think putting the challenges on the table and talk about it and maybe, hear from other people from different perspectives. And people normally get engaged quite easily in this kind of initiative. So
yeah. And I mean, I would say that I also do something that most people don't have the time to do, like when they are entrepreneurs. I've taken a productivity program that allows me to step back and take time off to really reflect and look closely at our practice. So for the last year or so, Fridays for me are reading. And what am I reading is all of the critiques to adaptation, all of the critiques to the interventions. And sometimes I come across like some very strong critiques and I'm like, okay, how can we embed this lesson in our future practice? And it's very hard, for an entrepreneur to get the time to really step back and have time to read and think and be like, how do we do this differently? How do we, I really feel that is one of the biggest privileges. I have many privileges. One of them is having found a mechanism to run the company, run business development, do all the projects, but also have time to think about our practice and how we want it to be. The reality is, as soon as you step out of as a consultant, if you go into what academia say, it's easy. It's easy for academia to criticize consultancy, but every week as a CEO or as an entrepreneur, you have all of these different competing, things competing for your attention. How do you ensure that in the longer term, you're still building beyond, that you're not just in react mode, you're in kind of like, offense, not defense. Yeah. So that's kind of like what the life hack method provides. I really recommend it to anybody.
Yes.
And to me, it's just allowed me to recover, Fridays for reading and writing. This blog came out of one of those Fridays, right? It's like, okay, I've consolidated some reflections. Let's put it out in the world, So I wish everybody had time to do that. But these days it's so difficult to get the time. I think if we did, we would move faster into new, modes of working. We fall into what I call the competency trap. I've done this. It's worked. It's paid off. I'll do it again. I rarely do. Actually, I haven't done 2 projects that are the same. Perhaps I've used 1 or 2 methodologies because I really like them, but most things evolve. We learn from, and that's what the collective is also attempting to achieve, is that we should be able to have the tough conversations about what didn't work, what were the failures, etc., to build our basis on how we do things better the next time. And it's very difficult for people to have those honest conversations at conferences. Because when you're in a conference, generally your funder or your partners are in the room and they don't want to hear you say, this didn't work, this could have, So we need to create spaces of trust where people, professionals can open up in a way that can help build better practice.
Yeah. Blunt honesty, and also build up your creativity. Like when you get that breath to write and to read and reflect. Also go for a walk, go for a swim, be in nature.
Just have time. Yeah.
Make yourself available to whatever the calling of, I find it very rewarding, like now that I live in Norway, for example, to just go for a walk in the forest or go to the ocean is just like, it gives you like a different understanding of things. But if you dedicate a day for nourishing yourself at the end, and by doing so, you're nourishing your company and the people that it's surrounding your company. So it's kind of like a big investment.
And I'm a student at heart. I love learning, like I take 3 or 4 courses per year. My last courses were, I took a course on Amplify with AI in Mind Valley. I don't know if you know it. I'm like a big consumer of Mind Valley courses. I took a course on EdTech, but I also take courses on abundance courses. I do a lot of meditation, a lot of yoga. So I do think that if I am going to be the driver of, a massive ship called ITACA, then this driver needs to be well nourished, and my vehicle requires, physical, mental, emotional nourishment. It's so easy to get lost in the idea of building something that you forget yourself. Yeah. But with time, I've learned at the beginning, when you're starting the company, you're like you don't want to give You don't want to delegate anything to anyone. You think nobody's going to do it as well as you and so forth. And eventually, I got to a point where I'm like, okay, well, Ithaca is a creature.
Yeah.
It needs a nanny. It needs others to sustain it. But I also need to sustain myself, because otherwise the little creature eats you alive.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And
Yeah.
with regards, like touching on that, can you identify what is your biggest hurdle today that you're kind of like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I tend to have, and this is like what my co-founder also says, I can have brilliant ideas, but I could fail at being able to implement them because I lack the number of hands. It's like, say I get a great idea, or, oh, let's work on this thing. And tomorrow a new project starts and I have to move entirely into operation mode. And then it becomes really hard. So I'd say we just struggle to retain a good, like, I wouldn't say to retain, but like we don't have enough human resources internally,
Okay.
So like literally, it's funny because like I've had, when you have intro conversations with other companies, that you're getting to know each other. It's happened to me a couple of times where they say to me, we're about your same size, we're 10 to 15 people. I'm like, we're not 10 to 15 people. I mean, we have a network of 240 people. But to mobilize that network, we have only 2 people at the moment.
Yeah.
We've been up to 5, but it's still not been enough, So for me, being able to have the team, the right team to be able to capture and retain the right talent to help support it, that has been a challenge, And it has been a challenge on me as well because, I mean, personally, I haven't found a more difficult experience through my work than that of having to ask someone to leave. Yeah. Because they're not performing. So it takes all of my energy. I cannot sleep. I cannot eat, So when these things happen and I kind of take it as my responsibility, I remember Eric Menendez. I don't know if you know him. He's got a course on Mind Valley it's called Business Freedom. That's another good one for business freedom. So he says when you fire someone, it's mostly because you did the thing wrong. Either you recruited wrong or you didn't give the person the right resources. So I guess when I'm beating myself hard, when these things happen, when I'm having an issue with a member of staff or with someone and I feel like them, like we didn't either, he doesn't have the right resources or I didn't choose the right person.
Yeah.
So that has been something that has kept us going like up and down, like these fluctuations on the team. But I think, I mean, it depends. I've just had a person who stayed with us for 4 years and that was the most amazing. He was my second in charge. I used to say his biggest talent was that he was able to stand me and put up with me. His name was Lucas Mira. And he's just finished at the end of this year. But he finished for very good reasons. Like he wants to move into another industry. But it's hard, when you've trained someone for 4 years to be your right hand and they leave, you're like, okay, how do we reabsorb all this between the other men? So my biggest challenge has been having the right team, I think, and ensuring a sustainable cash flow to capture better talent.
Yeah. And is there any way that the tool community could support you on this?
Well, I mean, I think so. I certainly think that I could get some mentorship support from someone to help me do better recruitment and better team management. I think my biggest mistake as a recruiter, when I put on the recruiter hat, is I'm too based on empathy, emotional, stand with the people. So people that I already know who said, oh, can I work with you? Or people. So it always has been like kind of like the friendship or the sympathy that has. So maybe I need someone to fine tune me, to help me with that. And of course, as it pertains to getting the right cash flow in order to be able to sustain a bigger team, where part of what we're trying to do this year is, I don't know how familiar you are with what is currently happening in kind of the development aid, humanitarian and consulting world. But last year was a devastating year for anyone working in this field because not only was USAID closed, which was a major funder for all of these kind of interventions, but also most of the European countries are now moving or relocating development funds to defense and security. And that for people in my space, it's a major issue because that's where generally the projects for community work have come from, either development banks, development entities, international corporations, and so forth. So we've seen a massive reduction in the amount of funds available in our sector, which means very high competition for the money that is available, a race to the bottom, which I'm not willing to race for, pervasive dynamics that don't make the work better. So one of the things I'm trying to do this year is to diversify our income sources, to start doing other types of projects that come from other sectors. And the two sectors where I have put my hopes very highly on are the blue economy and the space sector. The space sector, because it's investing a lot in Earth observation data, and they need people like me who can turn that information into something that communities use for planning.
Yeah.
So, and then blue economy. Last year, I went to like 8 or 9 different conferences. You know, there was the Blue Economy Financing Forum, UNOC. I went to European Climate Change Adaptation Conference. I went to several ones. And my biggest take on it was right now, for where ITACA stands, our best shot is to better integrate the climate agenda with the blue economy agenda. Because in blue economy, I perceive that in blue economy, just the way in which the topic is framed, it allows for a lot more innovation and implementation than climate. I'll give you an example. Yeah, so Macron speaks at BEF, at the Blue Economy Financing Forum, the president, and says, we are going to establish 30 by 30, marine protected areas. Nobody is going to have a stand against that. Everybody has taken their kids to the beach. Everybody has some form of connection to the ocean. But try to take off the subsidy of fuel or put another climate policy. They're they're not appealing. They're not palatable. So I think we have, and we know, from things like oceans, the David Attenborough video, that our oceans protect our climate. So I came back from Europe saying we're going to put a lot of effort on finding our future projects in the blue economy space. So what others in the network can do for me, having understood a little bit what it is that we are trying to do, connect us to organizations who are looking for people like us who really believe in the work locally, who will get our nails dirty, on the ground to try to see this come up. Yeah. And I'm very excited to be part of this network because I still think it's an untapped resource that I still haven't explored in its full potential.
Now that just by listening to you, a lot of names from female founders like you come to mind, like super interesting alliances or partnerships or technologies and innovation that you could set in place in your communities, right? Technologies that you could test, you could have pilots, you could figure out ways.
And this is the thing, I also like to try to get people to think of the Caribbean as a living laboratory. So they're not the canaries in the mine of climate change. They are the pioneers. They are the innovators.
Yes.
What they are facing and how they're responding, it's going to be a benchmark for many other regions. Say, for example, right now, we're starting to see people in the Mediterranean fisheries are starting to collapse because of bad weather. They didn't used to have so many bad days for fishing before. And now they have to deal with very strong storms at sea. Well, people in the Caribbean have been dealing with storms at sea for decades. There is something as well that this region holds in terms of understanding how to deal with this problem that is an export.
Yeah. Nice. My next question is with regards to strength through vulnerability. And in the Wavemaker podcast, we always like to explore a little bit of the human side of your leadership. You have already shared a little bit some points of the health of your lovely mother and, choices in life. But is there, it could be personal or professional challenge that really shaped you? Or if you want to take that example that you shared previously, how did you work? How did you work to learn from it and to grow from it?
I think sometimes, I'm not a mother, but I have heard this thing about how when their child is in a situation, a mother gets incredible strength or, that we get superpowers when we kind of need them. And to me, it's happened that, I go through something and at the time that I'm going through it, I'm not aware of just how much is happening. You kind of just get it through. And it's after when you look at it from afar, you're like, oh my God, how did you do that? How did you go through that? And I mean, for me, there's been a few moments, but I guess one where I could speak a bit more because it also mixes so much my personal and my professional was the experience with the hurricane. What the experience with the hurricane here in Providencia, because you see, I arrived to this house 10 days after the hurricane to find my place completely destroyed. And I put my tent inside my house without a roof, but there was no water. There was no electricity. There were no doors. There was no nothing. And firstly, like seeing something that you've loved and cherished so much, a whole island like that, it's really difficult. And then living in a place like that for sustained periods of times, it's also damaging, It's mentally very challenging because you start to normalize things that are complete bonkers. Every day is a new situation, So to give you examples, like at one point, like I have managed to put the glass doors and the glass windows and so forth. And I was inside the house, but because people were stealing materials, people were going into houses, I would have to kind of barricade myself inside the house with all the materials and put noise traps to see if somebody was around the property looking for things, And I've had people coming into the house and stealing. They even once stole my wallet, which I slept with very closely to my bed. So it was like a moment of warrior, like you're survival, you're going to get it through. But then later, even years after, you realize that that's the mental damage or the mental effect, of I have no siblings. And I'm a girl from Bogota City trying to rebuild an island, trying to rebuild a house on an island. So when you come to this island, it was full of military, workers, architects, all male, all male. But it's trying to, you're the only little girl from the city there. So that was very, very challenging. I had to put up with a lot of situations, things you'd have to get materials from another island. It had so many logistical difficulties doing that. And then, maybe we're missing some materials. I have to go many times to what is called the black market here, which basically means sitting down with very dodgy men at midnight, trying to negotiate a couple of boards or bricks or whatever. And that whole thing was just insane. Add to that, the difficulty of seeing my entire community without home, without hopes, and trying to build projects here at the same time. Because I did run 2 community projects after the hurricane. That was very difficult. That was very difficult because I came with all my Oxford and King's College ideas of climate resilience. And I had to, at one point, I was getting so frustrated that nothing was being done the way it should be. I had to grab all my books and just throw them out of the window and be like, you know what? I'm going to stop giving advice. I'm going to wait for people to ask my support and then I will give it. Because you are eager to help and you're eager to build back better. Go and do it. It's really, and of course, it's my mother's house. It had to be built better, more beautiful, it couldn't be less.
Yeah.
Add to that the professional frustrations of seeing how, and the thing here as well was the community voice was completely obliterated from the reconstruction. So the government decided they were going to rebuild. They brought the operators from Colombia. They did not want to, the community was barely consulted. So you see all of these people who have lost, they've just they've cut their hands, they're disempowered. And for me, that was a big moment. That was when I started realizing what all the other islands in the Caribbean face during hurricane season. And I've actually I wrote a peer review article around climate justice on this because I started to become very aware that if the people are not being, if the people who are affected are not at the center of the conversation, then we're talking about injustice. It's procedural injustice. And I think this happens in the Caribbean all over. So for me, it just strengthened my intention to work for the people and to build processes that are just in the making. But it was, it's 5 years after and I'm still here in the island, whenever there's a cold front or bad weather, people get a little bit on edge. You just get on edge out of their memory of the thing. And I remind myself this every time because it's a whole season, So I know that if I call someone in Dominica in September, even if there's no immediate warning of a hurricane, I know they have it in them, the pulse.
Yeah.
It's hurricane season. I've met people who have told me their stories about hurricanes from Hurricane Irma, which was almost 10 years ago. Their stories are so vivid that I struggle to forget what they told me, let alone what they saw.
Yeah.
So I think there's a mental health issue of people who work in our sphere that sometimes doesn't get documented or discussed. And what I mean by that is like, we are pushing it really hard to, when you're working in consulting, whatever consulting, you're pushing work through deadlines, through budgetary constraints. But add to that you are having to work with a lot of people who have, gone through loss, gone through trauma. And unfortunately, even if I'm as a good professional, I put a lot of my focus on building the trust, building the understanding, creating this emotional buffer for people, because sometimes when you consult them for a project, they will come up with things like this, that's just not formally rewarded in our system. It's an extra effort that we are making, You've heard this concept of eco-anxiety, this idea that like anxiety created by the realities of our degrading land and our degrading earth. Well, people in my field, we're trying to push for better, more resilient future, but we're constantly driven to a very, to all the degradation that has happened, to all the loss that has happened. And I think it's very challenging to navigate this space. You have to take a lot of care of yourself. You have to really care for yourself because you're constantly dealing with situations of loss for others as well. So I've had to for me, this rebuilding the house had so many scales and layers. It's been one of the biggest, learning lessons in my life. And well, of course, losing my mother at a time, she really pushed my career hard. And people really have they find it really hard to understand when I tell them that the two best things that have happened to me was having been born in my mother's family and losing her. And people are like, how can you say that? I'm like, well, it's given me a lot of strength. I mean, I would not be the independent, solid woman that I am now. It's like the last lesson they have for you, right? It's like, you can do it on your own now, and I stand by that. I really do stand by that. I am very grateful of all of the challenges that have passed my way, because it's those challenges that really shape you. It's not the easy days that shape you, right? So I count my blessings in all of those challenges.
Amazing. And paying it forward, what support, knowledge, or resources can you offer to other entrepreneurs in the community?
Okay. So I mentioned to you the ITACA Collective, which is one of the key things that we want to work on this year. But our other flagship initiative this year is going to be ITACA Learn. So we have come to the conclusion that for all of these amazing things that we are saying we want to see in the blue economy to occur, we need to build the workforce of the blue economy. We're always talking about investors, technologies and innovations, and where is the workforce? So ITACA is proposing to start micro-credentials and programs to help build that workforce. What can the community do for us? So on the one hand, we're starting to do a baseline assessment. Basically, what are the skills and the knowledge that people in the Caribbean region will need to be able to plug into blue economy projects? So you might be testing something in Norway or in the Mediterranean or whatever. You want to deploy it in the Caribbean. What kind of skills and what kind of workforce do you need? Because we would like to help to bridge that.
Got it.
So we would have to help those organizations who want to bring projects to the Caribbean to do that by starting to accommodate the grounds, so to say, by helping to build the capacities and the skill sets. Because otherwise you end up having alienated projects that come and do pilots with people from overseas all the time. We need to build the local workforce. So I'd like to help those who want to establish operations in the Caribbean to build their workforce. That's number one. Yeah. And I've talked to a couple of the Blue Venture studios and things like that. And I'm saying, well, let's see what's in your portfolio. Do you want to have a seaweed farm in Bahamas? What do we need from the Bahamian community to be able to provide to you? So that for me, it's a critical one. Then the second, I cannot stop saying how proud we are of our network of experts. Like we have 230 experts across the region. That means that we have hands and knees across many of the Caribbean and Central America countries. What that means for our partners is that we can very quickly disseminate information across our network to all these countries. We can also quickly define a team of people who may be able to support locally. So if you're doing a due diligence on a site, if you need a roster of local experts, if you X, Y, or Z, we can help building those teams for you. And of course, we can also help to extend that to other skills that maybe we don't have. You might have like a very specific need on robotics or something, but if people get onboarded into the network, then we can help mobilize that. So mobilizing talent, building talent, and mobilizing talent. Those are kind of the two things that we really want to get our hands on. And we're a private company. So sometimes what I would love to is people who have had similar experience. How do you make a private company do these kind of things, you know? Whenever I tell people what we do, people think we're an NGO. We're like, no, we're still for profit because I believe we have to demonstrate financial sustainability in this region. I mean, we can see that being based on grants is just not sustainable and it makes the region very vulnerable. So helping to build the workforce and helping to build the teams, those are two things that we can definitely do.
Yeah, beautiful. Love it. And very concrete. We'll make a calling on that.
Excellent.
Amazing. And we always end with this kind of championing another women. So do you have any female founder that would you like us to feature next or that you want to, cheer for?
Richenda Connell, the CTO, the Chief Technical Officer and co-founder of Acclimatize. So together with John Firth, Richenda Connell, for me is the best person I've worked with, used to, just be on the meetings with her and we would sit on in the same office and sometimes, she would be having a conversation. I would just listen carefully to how she is talking and how she's proceeding. And I learned so much about good practice and professionalism, from these women, just from listening to her. We meet every year in the UK. I come and see them. I've come to Chen's house as well. I stay in their house. And it's just really nice when you manage to remain in touch with someone who's really shaped your profession.
Fantastic, Laura. Thank you so much for the conversation. And to everyone tuning in, thank you for listening to Wavemakers. We are Tool, the community where ocean and new energy changemakers connect, collaborate, and scale solutions for a better future. Until next time, keep making waves.